You may be aware, I'm sure you've all heard of PREVENT, that it's one part of the government's counter-terrorism strategy, which is very much about stopping people from getting involved in something that could take them down the line of either supporting terrorism or committing terrorist atrocities themselves. What I'm going to cover in this workshop is, why chaplaincy is something that concerns me. I'm going to look at a little bit of a definition of what chaplaincy is, but also just give you a couple of examples that I've been made aware of, one or two that I've actually been involved in myself, of incidents that have occurred on university campuses where it was felt that actually if they'd got access to a Muslim chaplain, they may have been able to give those individual students a little bit of support. And actually, what do we need to do is very much a question that I'm going to put to you guys at the end. Definition of chaplaincy. It's a very Christian term. It's embedded within Christianity is chaplaincy, but it's something that's become, it's a term that's become used by all faith groups, particularly in the different settings where we do find our chaplains. So whether we're talking about prisons, whether we're talking about retail, and actually a lot of business centres now have their own chaplains as well. Airports, prisons, town centres, police, and within universities, they have these individuals who they call chaplains. And what is the role of the chaplains? It's very much about providing advice, providing support on the grounds of somebody's faith. Just give you a little bit of an idea of definition. The chaplain's role can be described as focusing upon four main areas: a leader of worship, pastoral care counsellor, team leader, and the manager of the chaplaincy. So in effect, we're talking about sort of an interfaith centre, people from lots and lots of different faiths who exercise these skills within the context of an intimate but vibrant academic community in which diverse faiths are represented. Those of you who've been to university or worked in university, I'm sure you're very much aware that a lot of our universities do now have interfaith centres where they have representatives from different faith groups. But it's where those individuals are from and how the universities get access to them as community representatives or faith representatives, for me, that becomes a bit of an issue. There was some work that was done in Lincolnshire a while ago that looked at, what does chaplaincy mean? What are those areas that we should be concerned with when we're talking about chaplaincy? And they came up with 5 areas. They talked about pastoral care, and pastoral care being actively listening, evaluating and engaging empathically in discussions and debates with individuals and organisations in times of deep distress, loss, unexpected change or turbulent restructuring. They talk about chaplaincy being about the spiritual side, affirming the spiritual potential of individuals or organisations in a coherent and respectful manner with people either of no religious affiliations or people who've got deeply embedded, committed faiths, but always within that context of respecting diversity. They talk about values and ethics, where they acknowledge that the implicit and explicit values and ethical nature of individuals and organisations, if appropriate, actively reaffirms or challenges the ethos that they hold, that individuals hold, or that organisations hold for that matter, while respecting that relationship that exists and those boundaries as well. Religious literacy, they say, in partnership with others, is about bringing about a religious literacy that is based on justice for all, that encourages individuals and organisations to practice a moral competence, maintaining cohesion among people of diverse perspectives. And unique networks, which I think is actually really important, is about allowing and encouraging that network of trust to be formed amongst and beyond individuals and organisations so they can establish a clear and open social responsibility agenda and to ensure the well-being of all within the confines of a place of work and surrounding community that is acknowledged and planned chaplaincy so that it's something that can be offered to all people of all faiths or no faiths, irrespective of where they're coming from. So there seems to be a slide missing in there. seems to have disappeared. Never mind. Let me just give you a bit of an idea of what we're talking about. There's actually no accurate figures for what Muslim chaplaincy, or actually chaplaincy generally, looks like across the country. And the most recent study that I've come across that has been done about this was something that was done in 2013 by a lady called Sophie Gillett-Ray. And she found that there were somewhere in the region of 450 Muslim chaplains in England and Wales. The vast majority of those were actually in our prisons. That says something as well. Of the number who are based within the educational setting, there are about 300 plus Anglican chaplains who work within universities. But we can only find evidence, there may be a little bit more now, but we've only got evidence of around 30 to 40 Muslim chaplains who are working within universities. Chaplains within universities, it's essentially Christian. And the work that they do is around advice, support. A lot of the people who are doing the Muslim chaplaincy are volunteers, they are members of staff, they may be the imam from the mosque down the road who has come in and said, can I be one of your chaplains? And the university have said, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to have you. As far as the courses and studies are concerned, there are 3 that I am aware of that are taking place currently in the country. There's one long-standing one around Muslim chaplaincy that's been run at Markfield Institute. There is a Muslim chaplaincy certificate that's run at Cardiff University, and there is another course that was set up about a year ago in, I think it was based in London, that was designed to teach people, for want of a better word, about what Muslim chaplaincy was and what their role would be if they went on to become chaplains. The issue for me is that there are a lot of issues surrounding Muslim students on our campuses that people aren't always aware of and don't always understand. So, for example, a lot of our Muslim students, at the age of 18, it's the first time they've left home. My 18-year-old daughter came to London 7 months ago, and boy, it was a culture shock. A couple of you in here met my daughter, and she wasn't very streetwise, and to suddenly be thrown into this environment where she is meeting people who want to go to the pub every night after the university. She is sitting in a mixed environment with boys and girls. For a lot of Muslim children, because they're 18, for me, they're still very much children. No matter how much the government will tell me they're adults at 18, they're still kids. It's one heck of a shock. And a lot of the time, you will find young people who actually don't know how to handle this. They haven't been provided with the tools, either from the schools or the colleges that they've come from, or actually even their own families as well, who've not actually been aware themselves what these children are going to encounter when they go into that university setting. And they're suddenly being told that they're adults. You've got to make your own decisions. You need to decide what time you're going to go to bed. You need to decide what you're going to have for tea. You're going to need to decide what to buy when you go to the supermarket. You're going to be able to manage your own finances. It's a big step for a lot of our young people who've never moved away from home, who've never lived on their own before. If they're home students, they're a phone call away. They can hop onto a train, go see their families if they're just on the other side of the country. But there are also issues then for our international students in particular, who come here. They've left their family, thousands of miles away. They have also, we talk about financial independence. I've come across international students who've said to me, my family started saving the day that I was born for me to come and have a British education. It is so important that I succeed. And they are so focused, and they've got so many other things going on around them, but all they are aware of is the amount of sacrifices that their parents have made in order to get them where they are. And when things start to go wrong for the students, whether they find the studies hard, whether they get involved with people that they feel they shouldn't be getting involved in, all those additional stresses, tend to manifest themselves, and that's the time when a lot of these students will turn to their faith, they'll turn to their religion for some sort of guidance. And unfortunately on our university campuses, there isn't always somebody there that they can turn to. I wanted to actually share with you a couple of examples of case studies that I am aware of, that I have been informed of things that have actually happened. And I've taken out all details on there, I've changed sort of a few things. But this was one that I was told about quite recently by an Anglican chaplain who I know very well. And he'd been approached by student support services who said that there was a Muslim student in hospital and would he go and see her because she had tried to commit suicide. The issue being that she was in her second year, she came from a very educated family, a family who had lots and lots of aspirations for her. She'd fallen in love with a guy who was a Hindu, and they'd got married in secret. Her family didn't know that she had got married, and this was causing her the most unbelievable stress. And she had actually committed suicide on a number of occasions and had ended up in hospital. And he went to speak to her, and he met her husband, who just didn't want to be with her anymore because he could not cope with the level of stress that this woman was under and the things that she was doing. And he apparently went to speak to her family to tell them that this was the situation, that they had got married, but he did not want to be held responsible if she ever succeeded in actually committing suicide. And he'd said to the chaplain, he said, actually, he says, the family were fantastic. He said the family were really understanding, and they said, you know, this isn't your fault, you know, you leave it and we will deal with it. The chaplain said, I honestly don't know what happened after that. He says, because the family then became involved, and she went back home with them. I was absolutely gobsmacked when I heard about this, because you just cannot believe that something like this would happen on your camp. You can't, as a mother, you know, I would really hope that my 18, 19-year-old daughter would be able to come and say to me, I've met somebody. You know, what do I do? You know, how do I deal with all of these feelings and all of these emotions? And I would hope that if she didn't come and speak to me, there would be somebody that she would go and speak to. And actually, you know, I would love it if there was somebody on the campus that she was able to go and speak to as well. This is a typical one. I can't tell you how many of these I've heard, you know, of students who are distressed, who are concerned, who will go and speak to student services, go and speak to the chaplain, because they've been told, yeah, you've got no choice, finish your degree and then we're going back home because we're going to marry you off to somebody in the village. And these girls are in turmoil. They're going through an education system in this country. They were born and brought up here. They want to have the choice to decide who they want to spend the rest of their time with. And yet they're living in this world where, you know, we talk about this conflict. You know, and whilst personally I've never had that conflict, I think I was just very lucky with the family that I grew up in, it's still happening. You know? Our families just seem to find it very difficult to understand that my children's generation have got very, very different understanding and ways of doing things. Doesn't make it wrong, it just makes it different. And a lot of these young people, as I keep saying it, they need somebody to talk to. They need somebody on the campuses who can understand them, who can identify their problems, and who can actually guide them, you know, in a way that they don't feel as if they're doing something that is going against their family or is going against their faith. You know, what they don't want is somebody to say to them, well, you need to go to a refuge because we can't have you going into a forced marriage. Yeah? But in the same respect, what we don't want is somebody saying to them, well, you know, see, Jannah lies at the feet of your mother, so you've got to do as she says, whatever she's telling you to do, you have to do. Because that isn't going to achieve anything either. You know, they need to have somebody who understands where they're coming from, as well as, you know, their faith as well. I could give you so many of these examples. It's actually quite frightening. And these are examples of, this was one that I was personally involved in. And this was for international students who were arrested under the Terrorism Act a few years ago. There was absolutely nothing there, and it all revolved around a student who had taken ill, a nurse who was being a little bit too proactive, shall we say, and contacted the police because she heard it ticking in his bag and these boys were talking a foreign language. They were speaking Urdu, they were international students, and they were trying to decide how to tell his family at the other side of the world and his nearest relatives in London that this guy was ill. There was a watch in his bag. Fortunately, they were released very, very quickly. There were all sorts of issues around that. But why did it get to this point? I had to go and get these guys from jail. There was nobody else. I was called and I was informed that this has happened. I was getting phone calls on a regular basis by the police, by one of those local police IAGs that were set up to tell me what was going on. I went to pick these guys up from jail when they were released 48 hours later. And for the next 2 days, I had them sitting in my house, traumatised. Because of one of the reasons I said earlier. These guys were international students. Their parents had scrimped and saved to get them over here for an education. And you know, all they wanted to do was talk about their experience and go back to university. That's all they wanted to do. And you know, I actually went to their graduation. And it still, you know, upsets me to this day, the stuff that these guys went through. But the fact there was nobody there other than myself that they could talk to. You know, and they had so many questions that they weren't asked. There were so many things that were going on in their lives. They really needed somebody. I'm really glad that I was able to help them. But at that point, that wasn't my role. Why wasn't there somebody else, you know, within the system to actually help them? And I've got on there, where do we go from here? I can give you 100 examples of, you know, conflicts that have arisen between Indian and Pakistani students over cricket matches. They've been absolutely fine, but then something happens, somebody shouts, you know, remember Kashmir, Allahu Akbar, and a riot breaks out. You know? Our universities have got all sorts of things that are going on, and particularly in the current climate. You know, when something happens in Syria, when something happens in Pakistan, you know, we've got international students, we have got home students that really do need that support. But where's that support going to come from? Yes, we have other Muslims in the staff, parts of student services. We have got we've got access to lots and lots of other people within the university. But actually, when you have Muslim students and their faith is a really important part of their identity, they want to be able to sit and talk to somebody who actually understands their faith. I'm really pleased that in one of the universities that I've worked with, the Anglican chaplain probably knew, you know, more about Islam than some Muslims that I know, if I'm perfectly honest. So on one occasion, when he was handing out leaflets for a charity event, and a group of Muslim students, as he turned around, called him a kuffar, he was able to turn around and go up to them and say, I think we need to sit down and have a cup of tea, love. Yeah? And he was able to challenge what they had said. Now, I know in other institutions, somebody would have picked up the phone and would have put in a channel referral. Yeah, and the reality of it in the world that we're living in. And we do need people on our campuses who can speak to our students, who can understand how important their faith is to them, yeah, without being judgmental. Because it's that issue that is stopping our Muslim students from going to ISOCs and from accessing some of the services that are available outside of the university campuses. I'm going to just leave that up there because I could talk for another 10-15 minutes, but actually what I would like to hear is what you think we need to be doing. For me, this is about getting Muslim chaplains on campus. And no disrespect meant at all to the imam here, that doesn't mean getting our imams on campus. Much as I would love Imam Asim to be a chaplain in the universities that I work with, we can't clone you. And unfortunately, some of the imams that are in our mosques, I wouldn't let near the university campuses. So what do we do?